Let's get our second sheet in. It just makes things nice and easy for us, that we're able to do each step according to the way it's been photographed. Now we come on to these larger capacitors. They're 100 microfarad. And the way they've got them installed is that they're installing these on their side. So we just need to bend these over. But of course we need to get the bend in the right direction. So we've got our position here. Let's tilt that so you can see. 100 microfarad. We've got the pins at this end, and then the body coming back this way. So the negative is on this side, the outside of the board. So we've got our capacitor, negative that side, and I don't like to bend them just directly against their own body, so I just slide my fingernail up, which provides just a tiny space, but it prevents it being too much of strain that close to the body. You don't have to, but I've always found it to be good practice. So here we go. We can just double check. We've got our negative on this side. The square pin or the square pad is on the positive, which is the longer lead. Now the other one, let's turn the board round, just balance it here. As you can see, the other one has the positive on the outer edge of the board. So we have the negative, which is going to be on the inner side, so I can bend it down this way. So long lead going in first to the square pin, shorter lead into there with the negative on this side, and we can just spread those leads a little bit. Right. So again, we'll just solder up one lead on each capacitor, and then we can take a look at them. That one's not too bad. This one, lift it up a bit. So it's very easy. All you have to do is take your soldering iron, reflow that joint, and press and position it with your finger. There we go. Next, step 7. Install the mic socket. So here we have it. We also have sort of one mechanical or more mechanically secure pin, being that front pin. You can also see on the board there's a little notch out. That's for this, as you can see, if we can get it to focus on this. The little collar on the socket sticks down a little bit, so that's why they've got this little notch. So this is one of those where this component actually is smaller than many of the surrounding components. So it'll have a tendency to drop down and drop out, which it just did there. Let's see if I've got something to wedge this up a little bit. So we'll just solder up this one pin. It takes a bit of heat, this one, because it's connected to a larger piece of metal under that socket. So let's just see. Here we seem to be flat to the board. There we go. Step 7 complete. Now we come to step 8, install electret microphone. As you can see, the pins are offset. They're not in the center of this. And in this, again, we've got a positive symbol. And they're saying to install it this way around. So it fits in like that. So, because they've said positive, both those pins are the same length. But what we can do is we can clip off just a little bit of this negative one, which will help us to identify the positive. Now we've made it really clear which leg on this is positive, because there's no actual markings underneath this of what is positive and what is negative. But we do have the square pad on the board. So if we were wanting to mount this underneath, we know that this is the square pad. It is the positive. As you can see from underneath, we've got the long pin coming through first into the positive. And we can't just drop it all the way down, because if I show you from this angle, we have some other connections there. So we need to space this off just a little bit. But I think this is going to create a bit more of a responsive sound level meter. The other one, I've got it turned up to the full, and for general speech, like just as I'm speaking now, let me bring this in. Just as I'm speaking now, it doesn't always pick up very well. In fact, it picks up, if you run your finger over the LEDs, it picks up that vibration better. So I think if we have this facing outwards, it will have much better chance of success. So I'm just going to space it off. And then we'll just solder up one of these leads and see how that looks. Okay, so we're way more than I wanted. I only wanted it a little bit. So we shall just do our little trick of reflowing the joint and then just pushing it in slightly. I think that will do. And of course we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. So, next step, install integrated circuit sockets. It's always good just to have a little look at these beforehand, just to see that the pins haven't got too smushed. These aren't too bad. They're very easy bent. As you can see, there's a notch on these. And of course, on the circuit board, you can see that there's a notch on the silk screen, and that indicates where pin 1 is. So we want to get these sockets lined up the same way. Now really, this would have been easier done before we put any of the other capacitors in. So basically, if we were doing this after step 3, it would probably be better, because then we could just flip these over. These would stay in place, whereas now they want to fall out. What you can do to stop that is you can just bend over a couple of these pins It's not great practice because it does make, if you have to remove the socket, it makes it that much harder if you're desoldering it. But we're happy enough with this. We know we've got our notch in the right place. And that holds it in place very nicely. So again, I'm just soldering one pin in on these to see how they are. And you can see this one's okay. That seems to have stayed fairly close to the board, but this socket needs to go in. So just reflow that, and I'm pressing up from underneath with my finger, and that's much better. Also notice that I didn't solder up one of the pins that I bent over. There's a good reason for that. Soldering these up, if you need to then actually remove the socket, even though it's only the only pin that would be soldered, that would be more difficult. Whereas if I needed to replace or remove this socket completely, I can just bend these pins back up and then just heat up the one pin, the one straight pin that I soldered, and the socket will probably just drop out, but it will certainly pull out a lot easier. It's all about making your life a little bit easier if you can. Of course, now we know we're all right, we just go ahead and we solder up all of these pins.